My cousin once told me a curious thing once. I don't believe in hell, he said. There is no kind of pain that a person can't get used to or even learn to appreciate. I've thought a lot about that. As long as we have the means to perceive our surroundings, we have the capability to appreciate it. If you've been on the internet long enough, you know what kind of absolutely vile things people have come to love. I don't believe I'm any different. It started back in 2016. I worked my second year as a lab assistant for a pharmaceutical company. A large Midwestern one with the blue sunflower logo. Lower end of the pay scale, high end of the benefits kind of gig. I didn't have that much going on in my life. It was just this endless cycle of overtime, sleep, and overtime again. I had an apartment on the third floor, modern place with a huge elevator and reflective glass in the hallways. They had a deal with the company and offered a rent cut for everyone who worked there, making it a sort of corporate hangout spot along with a home. I thought I was going to hate it, but I ended up appreciating it. But there was a fire. I don't know what started it, but it turned the first floor into an inferno. I was fresh out of the shower when it happened, barely covering myself with a towel. The alarms blared. It was so quick. You can feel the flames eating the air around you before you feel the heat. A hitch in your throat. It was hot enough for you to get boils by just stepping into the hallway. I tried making my way downstairs while my neighbor across the hall locked himself in his apartment. Last I saw of him, he and his family peeked at me through a closing door, their eyes reflecting the spreading flames from downstairs. I didn't make it far. Everything looks different in the smoke, and I got turned around. I tried to push forward, but it was too late. I knocked on doors, begging for shelter, but no one answered. I ended up in the corner of the hallway, pushed up against the elevator, feeling the heated metal melt the outer skin off my hand. Your throat closes up. You can see heat build on your arms, boils bursting like poxes, and before you pass out, you dissociate. You don't really believe it's happening. I knew I should have panicked, but I just shrugged it off. It wasn't real. It was like another world, another me. It wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. I'd never experienced anything like it all my life, so it had to be a hallucination. But that's the thing about experiencing something for the first time. You don't realize what it is. That's the best way I can describe it. Dying. I was only out for a couple of seconds, maybe half a minute, before the firefighters found me. They dragged me out and wrapped me in a blanket. I had second-degree burns all over, third degree in some places. Those hurt less. It burns through the nerves. You don't feel that until you start to recover. Waking up was unreal. I didn't understand that I'd been bandaged all over my head. I just thought they'd turned off the lights. I couldn't feel a thing, courtesy of a more than generous corporate health insurance and an even more generous dose of morphine. I remember someone talking to me, but I could barely hear them on one side. An eardrum had ruptured, and my left ear had fused to the side of my hairless head. "Oh, thank God," a voice said. "Thank God you're going to make it." My little sister, Sammy, she'd flown in from Ottawa. I was in and out of consciousness for days. I had nightmares about pain and anxiety about the drugs wearing off. Sometimes I'd hear machines beeping. Once, a nurse changed a bandage, and it felt like getting my skin torn off. I remember drawing in a breath to scream and then just gone. Blackout. I'd get these glimpses of real life sometimes. Someone humming in the hallway, my sister talking on her phone, a beam of light hitting the bandage across my eye, tickling a damaged membrane. I prayed not to feel anything because I knew that it'd just be more pain, unbearable, mind-numbing agony. Your body turning inside and out, trying to heal everything at once, hitting biological dead ends over and over. I think it was night when someone came into my room. They talked to Sammy. They sounded apologetic. She cried. Then a little later, someone else came into the room. They had something else to say. Her tone changed. "Hope? Please," she said, "whatever it takes." They rolled me into an elevator and then outside. There was a mild breeze that stung like nails on my missing skin. Transport. Sammy calling out in the distance. "We'll take good care of him." The prick of a needle. I couldn't feel a thing. I was out for at least 36 hours. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed, looking up at the ceiling, no bandages covering my face, a soft gray membrane covering my left eye. I blinked it away and instinctively raised my arm to wipe it off. My arm was covered in a thick, dark, ink-like substance. It clung to me like a putty, but I could barely feel it. I'd never seen anything like it before. My entire body was covered in it. It was on my face too, even on my eyes. But it worked as a sort of one-way mirror. It didn't block my vision. The closer you looked, the more translucent it was. I was fine. No pain. No restricted movement. Nothing. I sat up, accidentally pulling out a couple of wires from my arm. I looked down at my body only to see that all-covering ink putty dry up and sink into my skin, like morning dew on a dry lawn. Didn't feel a thing, not even a tickle. A nurse came running just moments later, ready to get to work. Sammy was with her, but when they saw me standing there, it's like there was a cooling breeze seeping through the room. The tensions just melted away. I'd never seen my sister in that state before, her hair having thinned at the edges of her ear and the bags under her eyes looking purple. Her face sunken, like she'd forgotten how to smile. But seeing me, she lit up like dawn. She ran up to me with her arms open but stopped. "Can I hug you?" she asked. "Are you okay?" "I think so," I said. "Yeah." So we hugged, and over her shoulder, I could see a corporate representative waiting for me in the hallway. "If you're confused, just know that I was too. We're getting there." Information was spotty at best. Someone threw around a project called Black Bell. The name super-adaptive nanoliquid was mentioned a couple of times. Basically, Sammy had given them the go-ahead to try a new treatment. I must have been on the candidate list since I was a loyal worker, and leaking company secrets would not only get me sued but cost me my career. Part of the deal was weekly checkups and participating in their trials. I could quit if I wanted to, but chances were that I'd go right back to that hospital bed if the treatment wasn't completed. I didn't really have a choice, but I didn't blame them for it. They had their own interests to look out for, and I'd been given this amazing opportunity. I could walk right out of there. That's worth an NDA. Coming back to the office a couple weeks later, there were some people talking about me. They said the treatment had been developed in one of our branch labs in Vietnam. It had been mentioned in a couple of memos as something tested in relation to vacuum treatment in low oxygen environments. I'd seen it too, but had no idea it had regenerative properties. I mean, you can read something on paper, but seeing it in action is another thing entirely. Most people didn't believe I'd really been in a fire. They thought I'd been taking time off, riding the coattails of an accident that consumed my apartment. I could have shown them pictures, but that would somehow made it even more unbelievable. I decided to let them think whatever they wanted. The higher-ups knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. So slowly but surely, I got back into that endless cycle of overtime and sleep. Sammy was sticking around for a while to make sure I managed, but apart from that, it was business as usual. Of course, what you see on the surface isn't always telling the whole story. I'd stay up at night imagining that excruciating pain writhing just underneath the skin. What if there was a hiccup in the treatment or some kind of side effect? Could all of it really come back? Could one wrong step send me back to the hospital bed? I'd lose hours of sleep worrying, looking up at the ceiling of my new bedroom, closing my eyes but not sleeping, still feeling the heat of the flames licking my skin, the hair on my arms curling up to die, little parts of me blending with the ashes, the smell of my own flesh, cooking. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was 2 weeks into my new routine when I had my first panic attack. Someone brought in a birthday cake to work, and they blew out the candles over lunch. There was something about the faint glow of fire reflecting on their skin that sent a spiral of thoughts rushing through me. Heat. My pulse ran away from me. I could imagine my skin trying to sweat, but the pores being melted shut. The pain I imagined wasn't real, but the memories it brought on sent it all to the forefront of my mind. I politely declined a piece of cake and ran to the bathroom. I threw up and curled into a corner, forcing my eyes shut. But no matter how hard I tried, I felt the pain, a mild heat latching onto me, bearing itself in my skin. You can't think away a panic attack. You just have to ride it out and wish the next one is shorter. Talking to Sammy about it over dinner, she decided to stick around for a few more weeks. I hadn't asked her to do it, but she was happy to. She'd made baked potatoes. I'd forgotten to buy new cutlery and plates, so we had to settle for paper plates and plastic forks. A single naked light bulb hung overhead. "You talk in your sleep, you know," she mentioned as the oven dinged. "I hear it through the walls." "What do I say?" "It's not really words, it's just like sounds," she said. "Long, drawn-out vowels, but it kind of sounds like words." "I'll try to keep it down." She gave me an apologetic look. She knew I couldn't control it, and she knew I couldn't try even if I wanted to. But it was a nice thought. It got worse, though. I would have nightmares and wake up choking. I'd feel my skin getting warmer at night. My anxiety would pop off at seemingly random times, kicking me out of whatever comfort zone I'd managed to make for myself. It could strike fast and stick around all day. After a while, it was more unusual for me to have a good day than a bad one. Coming home from work one day, I stopped at a light. I sat in my car, hands on the wheels, seeing the light turn red as I came to a full stop. The radio jockey chuckled about putting on some classic dad rock for a caller and put on Kiss with the song Hotter Than Hell. It's a nice song, but it put my mind in an uncomfortable place. I stared at that red light, hoping I wouldn't see the yellow light. Something about the glow of it put me right back there in the hallway, squirming around on the floor, the meat on my hand getting cooked on the surface of the heated metal elevator door. I closed my eyes and felt something. A soft, cooling coat expanded across my skin. The treatment, it was still there. I remember someone honking. Maybe the light had turned green, but I couldn't risk looking. I couldn't open my eyes. Maybe it would hurt. Maybe it had all turned dark. 100 maybes, locking my hands on the steering wheel and keeping my eyes closed. Then a flicker. It's like I manifested it. A spark reacting with my skin. Fire. It must have looked like an explosion. All the air getting sucked out at once, breaking the windows. The car popped from the released pressure as the entire car lit up. Ungodly pain. I couldn't scream. A single flame danced on my eyes as they fused shut. Nerve endings exploded with agony as the bones on my knuckles exposed themselves to the open air. It happened so fast, like someone shutting off the lights inside your mind one by one. Sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch, thought. You can't breathe. There is no air. You don't know what you're doing. You can't feel yourself. Are you standing up? Sitting down? Impossible to tell. They say I was completely engulfed in flames for a solid 2 minutes before a passerby managed to pull me out of the wreckage. They said I was covered in a black liquid, which they thought was motor oil. I was dropped onto the pavement, and the flames were put out by bystanders. The treatment kept me alive through all of it. Alive, but suffering. It kept me on the edge of life, not allowing me to cross over, and the agony stuck with me for what felt like an eternity. But eventually the sirens came. The EMTs would never hear of what would be a second miraculous burn victim recovery. I'd walk out of that hospital a couple of days later without any questions asked. The treatment put me right back to square one. Perfect physical condition with a couple of mental asterisks. While the firefighters didn't understand what had happened, the corporation did. Apparently, my ceaseless obsession with fire was triggering an adaptive reaction. Basically, I was tricking myself. By thinking so much about burning, it became the normal state of being, and the treatment adapted to it. It basically thought I wanted to burn, so it set me on fire. At least that's how it was explained to me. Knowing the cause of the issue helped, but also not. It's hard to put yourself in a state of mind where you're not allowing yourself to think certain things. It's like biting your nails or picking your nose. Thinking of how you can't do it makes it worse. Knowing that thinking too much about this one thing might cause a fire was as all-consuming as the flames themselves. Sammy didn't leave me, though. She figured out a couple of things we could do to alleviate stress. For example, I could start sleeping in the bathtub, and we could remove anything flammable. No drapes, no plastics. We also kept a fire blanket nearby. It was uncomfortable, but you can get used to anything. It was nice to know that it was there in case I needed it. A precaution. It puts you at ease, and you stop obsessing over it as much. I'd go to weekly checkups. They had me fill out forms, rating sensations and experiences on scales from 1 to 10, and rarely to often. A lot of it was generalized questions, but a couple of them were specifically made for me. These questions didn't have a standard answering sheet. There'd be some overpaid academic listing off questions with a nonchalant smile. Every week, a different smile, but the same attitude. I got the impression that I wasn't the only one testing this treatment. The questions they asked implied that others were having trouble as well, but in completely different ways. Multiple choice questions like, how often do you forget to breathe? How often do you forget to sleep? How much has your sense of touch diminished? With possible answers ranging from hourly to monthly. I made more adjustments in my everyday life. Fire blankets, extinguishers. Once I filled the tub with water before sleeping, as I felt an episode coming on. The ink would seep out of my skin to keep me from going hypothermic. It really was adaptive. Sammy did her best to help, but something she said stuck with me. As I was heading to work, she took some time cleaning out the tub. I asked her if she was okay doing that. It's not that different from changing bandages, she said. You gotta adapt either way. At least there's no pain, right? Trauma seeps into you like a poison. The bad days become the new normal, and the good days become this impossible ideal you strive to get. That perfect day without that sinking feeling in your chest, where you can sleep a little longer without waking up tired, where you can say you had a nice dream and can afford to put some effort into caring for yourself. Have that extra long shower, the freshly pressed clothes. But I couldn't do that. I'd be balancing on the edge, ready to burst into flames. I wouldn't wear my best clothes. I'd stay in the tub at night. I would keep my distance from my sister and my coworkers. All these little things you do to keep yourself from becoming a problem. And even then, things would spiral out of control. It happened once as I was going from the supermarket to my car. I don't even know what made me snap. Suddenly, it was all just fire. I burned all my groceries and was left exposed in the parking lot, covered in ash and writhing in pain. It was a short enough burn for my nerves to stay, making me feel every boil and crack in the skin, blood and soot on the concrete. The most embarrassing time it happened was at work. I felt it coming, and I hid in the bathroom again. As the flames burst out, the fire alarm tripped. Sprinklers came on. I got a nasty burn, but not as bad as the other times. I could still walk out of there. I draped myself in a jacket and had to walk out in front of all my coworkers, naked from the waist down and covered in boils. After that, I was put on paid leave while my treatment continued. We were going to work out an action plan with a therapist, but they had some trouble getting one that was accessible at this level of corporate secrecy. So while it dragged on, all I could do was wander around and try my best not to think of something that could burn my house down at a moment's notice. It was getting to me, and I suspect to Sammy as well. One night it happened in the bath. I had an awful dream, which shook me right awake. The bathroom was pitch black. Despite my eyes being open, it was dark, that it spiraled into this thought of my eyes having fused shut. It pushed that first domino in my chest, and by the time I got out of the bath, I was on fire, casting crawling shadows along the walls. Sammy came running. She tried to help, but ended up burning her hands. I pushed her away, giving her another burn on her neck. I pulled myself into the bath and turned on the water. It's hard to do when you don't have any skin on your fingers. Blood is slippery, and the knobs in the shower can be a bit finicky. The fire alarm was going crazy, but Sammy managed to turn it off. Concerned neighbors came knocking at the door, and she had to turn them away with a bleeding neck and hands. And I just lay in the bath, watching the last embers on my skin disappear, putting me back in the soothing dark. I locked the door, begging for the night to be over. Things got complicated after that. Of course, Sammy didn't want to leave, but the bandages on her neck and hands broke my heart. The way she winced as she made herself a peanut butter jelly sandwich, the salt stinging her wounds. I lied to her and said the company was bringing over a live-in care provider. It wasn't completely untrue. It'd been discussed, in passing. I waved goodbye to Sammy from the kitchen window. A cab drove off with her, and I could finally relax. She was out of harm's way. My way. I tried to deal with my anxiety in other ways. I went out a lot. Booze helps a bit, especially if there's a lot of distractions, live bands playing loud music, pretty girls waving their long hair around. Anything to get the finger in your mind away from that first domino that sends you spiraling into oblivion. I thought I could make something fun out of it. Once when I got really drunk, I tried showing it as a party trick to a couple of barflies. They thought I was kidding around, that I was some kind of fire breather or something. So when I willingly set myself on fire, they were horrified. They didn't know about my treatment, so when the dark ink covered my skin, it looked like I'd been turned into coal. Their eager twisted as they ran screaming back into the bar. One of them called the police. Another fainted. They covered their noses trying not to breathe in my fumes. I locked my knees into place, forcing my body to stay upright past the snapping musculature. My head dangled as my neck gave out. I fell face first into a puddle, but the treatment stopped me from suffocating. An inch of water, and it would have killed me. By the time a patrol arrived, I was long gone, leaving my tattered clothes in a black pile. I knew the roads well enough. I didn't care anymore. Coming home that night, I considered my options. I could keep going down this path, hoping something would change. Or I could struggle and kick my way through a life lived on the precipice of pain. No matter what I did, there'd always be that fear brewing in the back of my mind, reminding me that I was never far away from the gates of my own hell. I sat on my balcony for a while, looking up at the stars. There was something beautiful there, a kinship. They burned too, but they hadn't known another life. Perhaps that was the way to go. The next day I took my car and drove into the desert. I parked and left a note. No valuables. I hid the keys under the front tire, stripped down and put my clothes under the hood. There was no point in them getting burned. I wanted a fresh pair when I got back. If I got back, then I walked. I felt the sun on my skin, and I sensed the heat boiling at the edge of my mind. Come on, I muttered. Come on. I made myself think of it. I forced myself into it. I kicked myself down the black spiral in my mind and let the impressions take over. Come on, I begged. Get it over with. And when the flames came, I was relieved. I just let it happen. The fires burning my eyes shut and sucking the air out of my lungs. My body crackling and popping, breaking at the seams with every twist and turn. Your senses disappear. You can't scream. And with the treatment keeping me alive, I locked myself in a spiraling struggle as my body was repaired and burned over and over. Acrid flesh, ammonia, and burnt hair coming and going as my sense of smell circled. Flashes of light as my corneas struggled to remain. A violent tinnitus coming and going, like a screaming wave crashing into my skull. Never-ending pain. The kind of agony where a second turns into lifetimes. But it was too late. There was no one coming to save me. What had I done? You don't really taste anything. There might be little spots of blood leaving an impression of iron on your tongue, but it came and went. Same with touch. It would be pain or nothing. After a while, I stopped trying to breathe. I let my throat stay closed, and the treatment would keep me alive. I would feel my heart slowing, adapting. I realized that if I was calculated, I could make micro movements in bouts of muscular repair, meaning if I tried long enough, I could move, but only so slightly. I remember laying in the sand. The flashes of light were darker. It must have been night. I'd managed to move my hand straight into view so I could see my own fingers. There'd be darkness, a little light from the moon, a flash of clarity showing a coal-wrapped, skeletonized hand, liquidized, boiled fat staining the black sands around me. I tried to think, but even my brain was affected. There'd be long stretches of time where I sensed this gate in the back of my head, barring me from chasing any complicated thoughts. I couldn't remember my name. I could just think of something short and immediate, bursts of effort and strain. As my lungs came and went, I could think of sounds to make, vowels mostly. I settled on a couple that I found easy to repeat, just to remind myself that I was alive. E and O sounded particularly nice. EO, EO, EO. As I couldn't see or hear anything, my mind started to fill in the blanks. The waves of painful screeching in my ear started to sound like voices in music. The flickering lights began to look like angels. I would have conversations with them, and the pain would lull into a background noise, a nuisance at most. I'd have these presences sit down next to me. One had a voice like a beautiful piano, talking sonatas that would make me weep. Another would lie down next to me and wrap their arms around me, their breath on my neck like a soothing wind. They'd whisper of beautiful places in far-off lands, a beach where no one is alone, an island paradise where the sands are pink, a tree that reaches for the moon, wanting to go home. Little stories and melodies playing in the fire, begging me to stay. I could feel my needs melting away. When you're at the bottom of every sensation, there's no point in trying to look up. What's a glass of water when your world is on fire? What's a night of sleep when you're living in a nightmare? I let it all go, embracing the pain. It was so easy. After a while, I realized I could direct my efforts like managing a switchboard. Keep the eyes off, I'd think. Keep the eyes and the ears off. Instead, I'd focus on the muscles, keeping me at intense pain levels but allowing me to move, to touch. I don't know if anyone saw me. I don't think they did. But if anyone had seen me, they'd have seen a charred body rise from the ashes, facing the moon. I'd wander the sands, inviting the pain into the soles of my feet. I didn't care about stepping on branches or rocks. I'd feel the wind fanning the flames, fueling me like an engine. The more I moved, the more it hurt, and the more I could keep going. And as I moved, air would push into my lungs, leaving me with enough room to scream. And with that, I'd howl at the moon like a beast. EO, EO, EO. Time would pass, and it wouldn't. Your days don't really start or end. It all just keeps going. What was real and what wasn't would be blurred, making me chase thoughts I didn't know I had. I'd make up words that even a burned mouth could say, borrowing meaning from whispers in the fire. Words with depth and power that I'd forget in a second or an hour. There was no way to tell. I would imagine other burning people walking alongside me. Sometimes I would see them dancing at the edge of my vision. Long, elegant movement with trails of smoke puffing into the sky. Little lights allowing themselves to burn out and die. I'd cry for them, laugh at them, and all the while I suffered, but that was normal. I'd fall to my knees and stay there smoldering, not moving an inch. I'd give in to the thoughts that trickled into sparks of consciousness, becoming a conduit to whatever spoke through me. Vowels trickling past broken teeth, a prayer perhaps. My most vivid memory is that moment when I'm kneeling in the sand. Even with my eyes closed, I could tell I wasn't in our world anymore. I was in a world of fire, praying to an ocean of molten steel. Another dead man propped up to suffer. EO, EO, EO. The burning angels would listen and dance. The ocean of pain would soothe me. There was no heat anymore. It was home. I'd finally reached the other side of the shore, where pain was life, and being without it was agony. I'd adapted. I'd learned. I'd been perfected, and I came home. I opened my eyes. They'd followed me through. A dozen others wielding the same black ink across their bodies. They'd adapted too. They'd been made tall and strong and mad. They'd wandered other worlds, exposed to other horrors, and they'd been made grateful. Just like me. Brothers, sisters, a family, carved from agony and blisters. I'd go from ecstasy to ceaseless horror. It felt like time had stopped, and that I was settling into a strange eternity. One where complete inaction was the only logical thing to pursue, turning myself static. I could feel what that first fire had felt, warming our ancestors. I was on the wrong side of life, looking out at those struggling. I was beyond them, but something in me was still too human to accept it. But I was getting there, and it was so comfortable. A life without worries means a life without drive. But is that such a bad thing? Then a drop of water. I didn't feel the first one, but as the rain gathered, the flames died. I'd been in pain so long that being without it made me sick. All those little systems of my body that I'd forgotten or cast away coming back to me. Eyes, ears, taste, each and every one more terrible than the other. I cried and begged the heavens to send me back. But I was forgetting the right words, and the broken spots in my brain were coming back to me. The heavens couldn't hear me, and I couldn't make them listen. I lay there for hours, hoping I would dream myself back to that other world, where I belonged. But I'd lost it. My car had been towed. People had looked for me, but they hadn't found me. All in all, I figured I'd been gone for a couple of days at most. Turns out it was 16 days in total. A lot of people thought I'd been kidnapped or killed. And for the second time in less than a year, Sammy would see me come back from the dead. The treatment was deemed too dangerous. They didn't specify why. Maybe the discussion with the therapist got a little out of hand when I started to talk about ink-covered angels. Or maybe it was my desire to put myself back on fire. Either way, they had a kill switch to deactivate the entire thing, and they used it. Made me cough up something akin to a metal glob. They put it on a metal tray and moved it to a liquid nitrogen container with a stylized blue sunflower logo. It was strange looking at the treatment like a separate physical thing. It had been part of me, and losing it felt like removing a vestigial organ. I know I should have felt different once it was off, but I didn't. I still had the same thoughts, the same problems. But now that I thought about the fires, I didn't know whether to long for them or cower in fear. Maybe both. At least I didn't have to worry about hurting anyone. I was still on paid leave. I moved in with Sammy for a while, just to get a change in environment. I met some new people and grounded myself a bit. It's so easy to lose sight of the little things when your mind is in 10 different places. Sometimes you don't need much to make your day. A pat on the shoulder, a cool drink after a long day. The little things can do wonders. I eventually made my way back home. I returned to the office. I got a new place that didn't have a bathtub. I started talking to people without shying away, and I'd keep my eyes on the traffic lights when I came to a full stop. I'd cross the line where pain didn't scare me anymore. When you have known what I know, everything else seems dull in comparison. And if push comes to shove, I've lived through the worst of it. I wouldn't mind seeing it again someday. This was years ago, and my life looks very different today. I'm engaged and I live in a new town. New job, same company. I got a dog. But even now, as all things lull into a new normality, I think of those days. On the darkest nights, I can picture those ink-covered beings out there, watching over me from afar, waiting for me to remember and come home. I fear I might still have a part of me stuck in that place, that someday I'll just snap. And I don't know what's worse, to be paralyzed by fear or to long for it. Much like my cousin, I don't believe in hell. I don't think we can suffer forever. And sometimes when it rains, I long to burn.